Good morning. My name is Amy Malkoski, and I'm going to be talking to you about my journey to Lindblad expeditions as a naturalist and expedition diver. So, when I was 12 years old, I pulled on my 7 millimeter wetsuit. I donned my dive gear and I waded in to the New England waters for my open water certification in October. And with that, I joined the weird and wonderful activity of exploring the underwater world. And I'm very grateful I was introduced to diving by my family as a young person because both my parents and my sister are scuba divers, and all three hold degrees in marine biology. And this helped to foster a love for the ocean and for diving at a very young age. However, when I went to high school and I was looking at colleges and what I wanted to study next, I really had no idea what I wanted to be when I grew up. But I chose to follow some of my other interests, and that led me to a liberal arts school where I earned a degree in visual arts from Roger Williams. While I was at Roger Williams, I worked in the marine science program as well as the art program. So I worked actually at the shellfish hatchery in the wet lab. And what was really cool about that was that I learned that I loved and thrived in a job in which I could work in the field and work with my hands. I had the ability to work on projects with flexibility, which allowed me to approach them uniquely and achieve different independent goals for myself. And I found just a great interest in interacting people in teams where we're constantly changing what we're doing based on the situation or the day in the field. So after I graduated from college, I took a number of different jobs and internships that to some would probably seem unconnected. But for me, each of these experiences added valuable skills that further lent to my next job. So one of the opportunities that I had just before my current job was actually an internship as a marketing assistant at a small family owned Portuguese travel agency. And this couple was running trips to Portugal and the Azores that were for all sorts of different interests, for biking, for wine, for food, culture, lots of different things. And they were missing what I felt was this huge gap in their market, because when we would get the Azores magazine to the travel agency, you'd see a split shot image on the cover of underwater and below and above. And I said, why don't we have any trips that are water based? They were not divers, so this wasn't even something they had thought about. So I then did research and I created and then led a diving trip to the Azores through their agency. And this took us to Fayal, which is one of the easternmost of the Azorian islands. What was really cool is that this opened up a door into a career path that I hadn't thought of, which was travel. And that led me ultimately to an even greater internship. So I was the dive buddy intern for Lindblad Expeditions National Geographic in 2016. And this internship program actually no longer exists, but it has been morphed into a more substantial and fleshed out role that is still on board. And I feel grateful because I was able to participate in this internship when I did, because it gave me such a depth of experience in such a short time that I wouldn't have had either way. So this was a 3.5 month long internship on board the National Geographic Explorer, which is the ship you can see here. And Lindblad Expeditions is a cruising company, but it's an expedition company. So it's going to remote places in the world, taking paying passengers who are interested in learning about natural history, wildlife, inhabitants, and all of the different things that we encounter on an expedition. And this is what it looks like when I'm working. So I was paid an hourly wage only for when I was diving or doing undersea operations specifically, which essentially means that I made peanuts. But what I learned over my 3.5 months was completely invaluable. Could not have had a better sort of just dive into the deep end experience. And I was able to work with an international crew of people from over a dozen different countries. I dove in 7 countries during my contract, including up to polar regions and Arctic Svalbard. And I learned about animals and places and people and cultures that I had never even heard of, which was so amazing to then learn about and share and have conversations of this new knowledge with others. When I started, I had very basic required diving credentials that allowed me to be able to safely diving in cold and polar waters, which is rescue diving and dry suit diving. And those were the two credentials that were most required of my role. Now, after 3.5 months and incredible on the job learning, I wanted to have a greater depth of knowledge about my critter. And so I actually took an online marine biology course at the Salem State University. And this was really great for me because it gave me a more firm base to talk about marine life that I was going to be encountering and filming while on board the ships. And that would allow me to better communicate these things with the guests. And I also got additional credentials for diving that allowed me to enhance and push into even more extreme diving and working environments. So all of this was continuing and additional learning that I wanted to go back to do the job that I had been doing, but taking it into the next role. So the next role after this dive buddy internship was to be a naturalist and expedition diver. This is an independent contracted role on board the vessels, and I've worked in this for the last 6 years. So a naturalist is someone who's speaking about the natural world, whether it's animals, people, culture, history, wildlife, geology, etc. And then an expedition diver is somebody who's diving in remote regions without land support or additional support outside of the vessel, and the places that we're diving either have never been dove before or are environments that have consistently changed. And so the weathering and the site itself is something that is new to us or to new to the environment that we're in. So there's the secondary role of the expedition diver and the naturalist, and then there's the lead role of the undersea specialist. So this team of two works together, and this allows them to safely go into these environments. So I started in the secondary role of dive buddy safety, and now I'm currently in the primary role, which allows me to do filming and presenting footage to guests. But both of these team roles are so vitally important because the dive buddy is literally the safety. If you are the undersea specialist, you're focused on filming, you're focused on zeroing in on this one environmental animal, while the other diver is checking around the entire environment, taking a look at all of your depth gauges and all of the information that you should be checking on, and keeping an eye on the undersea specialist. So basically, they're the safety as well as finding cool critters and pointing them out. And together we use diving, we use a splash cam, which is a fancy term for a GoPro on the end of a long pole. We use an ROV, which is a remotely operated vehicle. And these technologies allow us to show the guests what is below without physically bringing them up, and having this greater connection to the oceanographic and marine biology and underwater world. And it kind of fosters this further interest in this conversation, which allows for conversations about conservation as well with the guests on board in all of the regions that we're traveling to. But those aren't the only things that I'm doing on board. So I'm also a Zodiac driver. I have a captain's license, and this means that I'm driving Zodiacs, which are small, rigid, inflatable boats. And we use these for activities with the guests off the ship. So we shuttle them to shore for hikes. We go on small Zodiac, small boat cruising around to look for wildlife or different scenery environments. We also do kayak operations. We lead hikes on shore, spot wildlife for the guests on the ship or on land. We give presentations, and we do numerous other paperwork behind the scenes roles that are super vital and important to the job that we're doing, especially in the regions that we're in. So these are some of the credentials that I had before working at Lindblad, and these all helped to link in and add to the job that I was doing. And since working with Lindblad, I have furthered my additional professional credentials for my job that help me to continue and advance in my role They allow me to work with new technology, new people, scientists, and even in new regions of the world based on these credentials, these experiences, these trainings that have been vital and opened a number of doors within the company and other companies that do expedition travel. So I don't always have to just learn these professional credentials, but I basically had to learn how to read new languages, reading the wind and the wave charts, learning how to plot on a paper chart and how to read that chart. So, different topography and depths of the environments that we're in. Sometimes we're going to places that are literally uncharted waters. So, in the image on the right hand side, you can see there's very little information in that chart. And you have to read in the field what the environment looks like and then reference back to the topographical chart, the paper chart, to see if you can sort of link up where the places you are might be. We have to take a look at the tides and the currents, which can be vital and incredibly strong. Sometimes in places of Alaska, there's a tidal swing up to 24 feet. So knowing how to read not only the charts and the information ahead of time so that you can plan for the best time in which to create your operation in the field, but also then to in the field look in the environment, see if it's anything like the prediction, or then assess to find a new spot that would be safe for operations with the guests or with the dive team while off the ship. So these different things have led to a lot of quick thinking and adaptation, and they led us to explore many different places that bring such special experiences to not only the staff, but the guests that we're bringing to these environments. So this is a video of what it looks like to get geared up for a dive. The warmest that I get is Baja California in the winter, and the coldest is the polar regions of the Arctic and the Antarctic. So the water can get to 28.4 degrees before it's solid ice. And that's how cold it will be if you're diving in those regions, which means we need a lot of gear. That was just us getting geared up in the boat, let alone the 15 minutes it took to get all our layers and our dry suit on while on the ship before we got out to the site that we're in. And this was a dive in Southeast Alaska. And sometimes we find amazing, wild, and different things. And sometimes we find the usual suspects in the places that we're going, but we never know what we're going to see until we get into the water because it can be completely different site to site, year to year, and environments are constantly changing as they're influenced by different factors. This is an octopus that I filmed in Patagonia off of Chile. And what was really cool about this interaction is that you can see that it's holding something in its arms. So it appears to have food inside. It's feeding on something. It wasn't bothered by us. It took its prey. It was just kind of crawling along the bottom till it could find a nice little place to settle down and finish off its meal. And showing this to people right now, a lot of people come up and say, "Have you seen my octopus teacher?" And that's showing something that they've watched and learned about at home, linking it into a real in the wild experience with this same animal and fostering this connection that they didn't have before and this further interest in learning about this different critter, which is really cool. So we go down and we film, and then we come back up to the ship and we have to quickly edit everything that we just filmed and turn that around so that we can share it as a video. Our operational day, we wake up in the morning, we have breakfast, we go off the ship for a morning operation, whether it's a hike or kayak or Zodiac cruise. During that time, perhaps myself and the other diver went off and were able to get some underwater footage, or we were on shore doing the same activities, leading hikes or doing that kayak operation. Then we come back for lunch and we have another afternoon operation as well. So finding a time in which to edit an hour-long footage, you have to be quick. It's a very quick turnaround. And then taking that footage and making it into a small movie, we are able to then talk over that movie, explaining what's happening, what you're seeing, and how it's connected to where we are. So the footage that I was just editing in the previous clip, this is what it turned out to be. These are Peel's dolphins off the Falkland Islands, and they're bow riding off of our small Zodiac. So we're driving at a low speed. They like to get that wake and surf with us, and I'm using our snazzy splash cam GoPro on a pole to get footage of these beautiful dolphins swimming all around us, playing in the kelp. And then what I do is I take this video and I bring it onto the ship after I've edited, and I narrate over it. I talk about the Peel's dolphins. I talk about their intercoastal relationship to the Falkland Islands, how they're only found there, and different information that allows them to have a better understanding of the animal that we saw. A lot of these people saw these dolphins bow riding on our Zodiac as we brought them to shore, and highlighting different parts of the animals, different behaviors, different environmental factors that could be affecting them, particularly in the region that we're in. It allows us to have this really unique conversation about whatever it was we saw that day, not something that we could see, not something that has been seen in the past, but the experience that we're having right then together. And it lends us to a better, deeper understanding of what it is that we're looking at. Now, this is pretty much what it looks like when I'm making this presentation. About 5 minutes before I give it, I've got my computer, I've just edited it together, I'm making any last minute notes, finding any other tidbits of information, or really excitingly, sometimes I come back to the ship having filmed something that I have no idea what it was, or a behavior that I've never seen before in an animal, and I get to talk about it with some of the other natural history staff who might have an understanding. I get to talk about it with the guests if we have no idea still, and see what theories or observations they've made, and then also referencing all of the field books that we have on board, which allow us to get a better understanding or a little bit deeper knowledge beyond what we might have had in our conversation. So a lot of this is what I do. Behind the scenes, I'm doing paperwork, I'm doing research, I'm doing editing. Half of my job is out in the wild, and half of my job is a makeshift office, doing things that are mundane but necessary, filling tanks, maintaining dive gear, a lot of paperwork, inventory, and different information like that. Sometimes we get to use different technology, and this is our plankton and plastic tow. So it's basically like a underwater butterfly net, and we attach it to the side of the Zodiac. We drive at a low speed, and we see if we can gather samples of plankton, small microscopic little animals, in which to show to the guests and have a conversation. And also, we're same time doing a plastic tow. So we're looking for microplastic to see if there's anything that we might have found, and any microplastic samples that we find on board any of our ships across the world, we take those samples and we send them to WHOI, to Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, where the Sea Education Association, the SEA program, is running, and they're collecting microscopic microplastic samples from across the world, from all sorts of vessels, from all sorts of partnerships and scientists, and they're implementing this program where they're gathering this data to create essentially a map and a catalog of the entire world to see how much and where microplastics are being found. So we're not just finding footage and sharing those experiences with the guests, but we're participating in citizen science projects, and we're involving the guests on board in those processes, bringing them onto the vessels with us in order to do these plastic tows, to share their experience, to collect plastic from shore. So there's a lot of different programs that we have that are allowing just everyday people to participate in science, and that's lending to a larger science collective of information. I've had some very incredible experiences throughout my 6 years with Lindblad Expeditions, National Geographic, and this was one of the largest contributions to science that I participated in. So we were in the Drake Passage, which is the space between South America and Antarctica, and there's oftentimes such incredible waves, as you can see. We're getting out in the boat in the middle of the Drake Passage, which is really unheard of. But the reason we're doing this is because there was spotted type D killer whales. So there are 5 ecotypes of killer whales in Antarctica, and 3 of them live down across the Antarctic Peninsula. One of them lives in the Ross Sea out by Antarctica. And then there's this one, the fifth one, the type D killer whale that is only found in the Drake Passage. And this footage of these killer whales is the first footage underwater ever of type D killer whales. You can see that they have an incredibly small eye patch, so that white circle that's just above where their eye is, and this is what allows us to recognize that this animal is this animal. The person that actually wrote in the scientific book about this specific ecotype has never seen them before. He wrote it based on stories, interactions, reports from fishermen that have been working the waters between the Antarctic and South America. So this was an incredible ability to share this footage from underwater, to get off of the vessel in conditions that were calm enough to allow us to safely do so, and to film with our underwater cameras and our splash cams a pod of type D killer whales swimming in the Drake Passage from the vessel that we were on. It was one of the most incredible opportunities and abilities to share this.
Start studying taxonomy of slugs now. Yeah, good day. Good day to feel.
So sometimes we are able to have incredible interactions with wildlife like this because we are traveling in such remote regions. We are finding animals that are very difficult to find. And as I said, being a part of the undersea specialist team, observing new animals, behaviors, finding things that we can contribute into science, these are the things that I find the most growth in my job for myself. Running back to the ship to discuss with the other guests or scientists or naturalists or the bridge team who've been traveling to these regions for 30 years and never had this interaction before, what we just saw and experienced, and then how to best communicate that with the guests in the world is a really amazing and challenging opportunity. And as my path started out quite squiggly, going through art and science, which to me are really one and the same, they interact so seamlessly with each other, both in the arts and the science, that together they're very important as a whole study. And all of those path opportunities have led me right to these achievements. And this passion has allowed me to spend the last 6 years as an undersea specialist, where I now work for full-time Lindblad Expeditions. And over the years, there's a lot of travel. So this is all of my bags. And this year to date, from January 1st until Boston Sea Rovers weekend, I have taken 35 flights. I've been at sea more than I've been at home, and I've spent nearly a day underwater. And this is not a totally normal life. This is a very unique way of structuring your year and your living pattern. And it's quite nomadic, but it's also very rewarding. So I work 180 days out of the year, which is roughly 6 months at sea per year, and the other 6 at home, not consecutively, but sort of a month off, month on situation that allows me to travel to different places to meet our vessels and to lead these expedition cruises and undersea specialist opportunities with the guests. It's not for everyone, but for me, I have found a love in this life path, and it has been a conglomeration of all of the different experiences that I've had thus far. Now, the number one question that I get when I talk about my job is it cold? This is me sitting in a hot bucket of water after a dive. It's absolutely cold, but it's also incredibly worth it. Are there any other questions?